Hi, I'm Jamie Ananda McConaughey. Welcome to the Tantric Life podcast. And there we go, we're recording. So I'm super excited to have with me today Daniel Erulian. And Daniel is a mischievous mage and a ritual embodiment yoga teacher trainer with backgrounds in Tantra, magic, divination, runes, martial arts, many other things. And Daniel has a YouTube channel, which is really excellent, and a podcast as well, which is really called Make Yoga Magic Again. And you've got lots of other really fascinating stuff, some of which I hope we're going to explore in today's conversation. So, Daniel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Yeah, it's great to be on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I was just mentioning to Daniel before we started recording how he does all these fascinating things. These are all the things that I wish I could be doing. So I'm really excited to have got you on here on the podcast so I can grill you on some of these topics that I'm fascinated about. So I think I'll just kick off by asking you a bit about yourself. So, Daniel, who are you and what do you do?
That is a great question. I think I'm a very curious human who loves to explore and play. I think since I was a kid, I have loved to take things apart and see how they work and try to put them back together in new ways and make a lot of mistakes in the process. But I'm just captivated by how much access to information we have in this modern age. I think, we romanticize, ancient times or, past times, but really, I know there's a lot of not so nice stuff happening in the world, and I think it kind of always has been the case. But we really are lucky in this day and age to have access to all the things. The shadow aspect of that is there's so many cool things to delve into, and what I'm constantly learning is that I can't do everything, or at least not all at once anyway. And so my biggest challenge has been, choosing what to focus on. And if I am going to pursue different paths and lots of different things, what is the centerpiece that weaves it all together? And what I've found, at least in my case, is yoga is the thing that links everything together. So I, have questioned religion and philosophy and always have been interested in questioning what happens after life and all these different things. And I've delved into a lot of different traditions, which we'll obviously delve into depending on what questions you ask. But I really think that yoga is the part for me that weaves together all the different pieces. And I mean, one of the definitions of yoga is to yoke, to bring everything together. So I think that is a pretty perfect piece.
So this is something that you've kind of sort of carried all your life, sort of thing, and you've sort of gone deeper and deeper as you've progressed through life. So how is that like showing up currently at the moment?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's a really good question. So I guess how one of the first ways it showed up, just to show an example, is when I was like 17. I was in a long-term relationship with a girl, and I remember having the conversation with her, being like, "What do you think happens like when after life?" And she's like, "I don't know. I don't think it really matters. I don't really think about it." And I just remember feeling so odd and weird for thinking about it. And it has been the mystery that I've been searching for a long time. And I think the difference in how it shows up now is I have a much more loose grasp on what the truth is, because I think back then I was looking for the truth and looking for a definitive answer to it. And I know it sounds funny, but it is like mystery is the most important thing to me, unraveling the mysteries of life. But a deep part of me hopes that it is unravelable, like that it remains a mystery, because it means the game never ends. And I think as I go deeper down this path and all these other paths, I think there remains a sense of mystery about it. I think there is an unknowable unknown that works in between the gaps of all these different traditions, of all these different ideas, and that has to work in the gaps. And it just, yeah, and it remains a mystery. And it's like the more you try to grasp it, the more it just slips through your fingers. But on the flip side, that doesn't mean that, like, I dislike ambiguity and vagueness for the sake of trying to sound like you know something that others don't. I really dislike that. So it's tricky because I love mystery, and yes, some things can't be explained very well in plain English, but we should still try to do it. And I think I see a lot in the spiritual world and industry, especially being in an industry, like in a spiritual industry such as yoga, where it's hard to show credentials, right? Like a surgeon, it can obviously show their credentials by the training they've received and their ability to be a surgeon successfully, right? Or someone who is a builder or a construction worker, you can see clearly the results of their training or their legitimacy. Whereas in the spiritual industry, it's like the more you can just like put on a good show and be very vague and abstract with your wording, that just gives you more credibility. It's like, oh no, they just, none of what they're saying makes sense because we just can't understand it. We're just mere peasants, and they're just some enlightened, reincarnated Egyptian priest or priestess. And there's not. It's just our lowliness, as plebs to no. It's like, yeah. So anyway, I'll go on a
Yeah.
tangent, but I'll wait for you to ask me
Yeah.
this
No,
question.
I know, like, this idea of the unknown and the mystery, and that there are depths and expansive vastness out there that's way, way beyond our capacity as humans to grasp, right? And I also sometimes sort of reflect on that. On the other hand, I know from following your content, I know that you are very like clear and precise and about what you do and what you teach. And so you're definitely not one of those kind of vague, airy fairy kind of teachers who's like just trying to teach something to make people sort of just feel good because of some vague ideas. No, I definitely see that, and in you, and I think it's an interesting. It's almost a paradox. It's almost like this kind of contradiction, and I see that in a lot of spirituality, or authentic spirituality, and
Mm,
the traditions often feature a kind of curious like paradoxes about
yeah,
like you have to
I
you have to
I
make a
agree.
big effort, but at the same time you have to relax, things like that.
Yeah, I think if there are any universal truths, they're all paradoxes. In my opinion, I think because the mystery that's unknowable, and no matter how hard we try, we can never really fully understand it. Yet, I think it's the most important human endeavor to try to unravel this unsolvable mystery. And to some people, that would just be insanity. But it's all cliche. It's all about the journey. So,
Mm.
um, yeah.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Um and there's do you feel like that urge, or I suppose a question is coming up is why do you feel that urge to unravel the mystery? I mean, why not, if it is such a vast unravelable mystery, why do you pursue it? What drives you?
I think the pursuit of wonder. I think I it's funny, it's another paradox. Like, I want to know everything about everything. It's just innate in me to want to know how everything works. But the biggest idea of, like, the biggest depressing thought to me is to imagine that I would know everything, because where's the wonder? And I do I do fantasize sometimes about maybe living in prehistorical times where they didn't understand, like they didn't have a map of the world. They didn't understand, what was out there. And because we seem to have an answer for everything these days, which I do appreciate in so many ways. But again, paradoxically, it's like, what is there left to wonder about? And I think it is this concept, and it's just, the search, like the explorer just trying to unravel these ideas. But yeah, and again, that the answer to that is probably a mystery, and I think that's why it is mysterious. That certain people, the mystic archetype or the mage, the magician archetype, is drawn to this mystery. That's why they call it mystery schools. And again, paradoxically, I don't really have a clear answer for that, but I can try to describe it. And I guess it's like, why are we attracted to some people? We can rationalize it. It's like, yes, they appeal to us based on certain types we were attracted to during puberty, and it kind of, that idea of crystallization inertia. It could just be they're objectively attractive, they resonate with me on certain ways, but there is that mysterious essence to it which we can't really understand about love. And I think I get that same attraction to the mystery of life. And I feel like I really am in love with this, like, seeking of the eternal mystery and this dance with it. And in the runes, we have this concept of runa. So each rune is a mystery, but then runa is the ultimate mystery, which all other mysteries stem from. And they do talk about it being ungraspable. It's like that mirage on the horizon that I'm constantly heading towards, yet I know that I can never actually reach because it is a mirage. But through that process of the desire of the mystery, it carries me on. And we all have that to some extent. And it's when we lose that desire, when we lose that passion for something, that we stop moving. And that's usually like when we do get depressed. And when I look back at times of depression that I've been through, and it's because I've lost that sense of wonder, I've lost that sense of desire for the unknown, and I've kind of lost that that drive for the mysterious essence and the play and the dance with it all, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's really like I love the way this approach that you have. It's a very humble approach. It's a very like there's that expression of beginner's mind, right? Of like, no matter how many years you've been studying and practicing, you still have beginner's mind. You're still like, there's so much more that you don't know, that you are open to like learning about. And I think that's so important for a kind of spiritual path, for a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
And it makes me think sometimes of like, I've sometimes reflected of thought like, what if, we often think about like God as, we have different people have their different concepts of what God is, right? But generally it's some kind of bigger being, or maybe a higher consciousness, or perhaps even like an infinite consciousness, right? But then I sometimes reflect, what if, supposing we became one with that infinite consciousness, and then we realized, oh, above that there's actually bigger consciousnesses that go beyond infinity, like we can't grasp that. So it's like this never-ending expansion in a way.
Yeah, and I love this question, like, of what is God and like what is the universe, because when you really try to break it down, it's an important conversation. And both on the simple point that often when we talk about these things, we all kind of want and mean the same things if we actually ask each other questions. And instead of fighting each other and all that sort of stuff, we can kind of find a common ground on it. But also, which is more confronting and a lot of people have resistance to, is actually breaking it down. And so saying, okay, when you say the word God, do you mean a being who has values and opinions? Okay, cool. Let's say we do. Then what gives this being the hierarchy of being the ruler of everything, right? So it's like, okay, well, they created it. Okay, cool. Well, if I was a parent who created a life for a child of mine, but then I still was like, flooding their room and then like, doing all this stuff that like is listed in these religions, like, and I become an abusive parent, what gives me the right, just because I created the life or created that being, gives me the right to actually have domination over that? And, most people would say, okay, if that was literally the case in a real life situation, I would be an abusive parent and we should, take me away or take the child away. Then what then changes that? Because this being is a like spiritual being per se. And it's like, it seems like such a logical conversation to have, but it's like people just don't want to have the conversation. Like, oh, it's different, and it's a bit, how is it different? And is this making sense? Like trying to
Mm.
rationalize what we're actually trying to say here, or from a as I understand non-dual tantric view, saying maybe God is actually this infinite source that flows and moves through everything. And you saying, is there like other beings outside of it? It's like me, what I'm trying to do is find the thing that encompasses all the other things. Because to me, this kind of Abrahamic God is a finite being inside of maybe a bigger cosmos. And so it's like, if that being, to me, if it has values and opinions and is something, it is also not something else. In order to be something, it needs to not be something. And so if a deity or a god has opinions and values and very clear agendas, then it is also not all the other agendas and things. And that it must exist within a more vast cosmos. So what is that more vast cosmos? And I think I really like Tantra because it does have those answers. And I love the 6 layers of self model. You actually, I think I saw in one of your podcasts, you were one of the few people who mentioned it. So the five
Yeah.
plus one layers of self, with like the original Tantric koshas model. So I don't call it koshas because everyone thinks of the Vedantic model of koshas, that is taught in like every yoga teacher training. But yeah, I really, so my main, because you wanted to know about ritual embodiment, essentially the whole curriculum is based on that layers system. And so if we talk about that layers system as a map of the cosmos and a map of God, be like, okay, cool. So we've got Vastu, we've got the stuff all around us. And then we've got our Dea, we've got our physical body that also relates through the 5 senses, connects to all that. And then you go deeper into another layer. So we've got Chitta, which is our, thoughts and emotions, and how they kind of dance and weave. And, every conscious thought is driven by an unconscious emotion, and every conscious emotion is driven by an unconscious thought, and this like back and forth dance. But then you can take another step back and observe all that. So you can observe your thoughts and emotions, and then your body and the stuff around you. But then you notice like what's flavoring all that is like the pranic layer. And have you eaten today? Have you slept well? Like, what is this, all these deeper held beliefs of like these archetypal subconscious ideas that you've developed over time, or possibly from past lifetimes, who knows? But then within all that is this spaciousness of shunya, the void, which you can actually just observe all those things as well as the spaciousness in between. But then what is observing it? And then we have Chit, the pure awareness. And understanding that that same awareness of Chit, that pure awareness that you're having right now, is the same awareness that you and I share, that is everything. It's like God is, like, from this perspective and my perspective, this multifaceted ocean of all these things happening with different vantage points. And, essentially God was bored being all and everything at once. And so to experience itself, it had to separate. And through that separation, it makes the 3, because you don't just make 2 from 1. You have to make the 3, because through that process, by splitting into 2, you then have the observer, the observed, and then the space. Because if you're not 1 anymore, you are 2 within a space that creates that separation. So then the game starts. Then we can like start to, and we've all done this as kids. If we don't have someone else to play with, we can play with ourselves. With, let's say, figurines, like just say someone has dolls and they're playing with 2 different dolls. It's still the one person puppeteering these 2 dolls, having an interaction. like, to me, it's not a big like a big difference. It's like God wanted to experience itself through lots of different ways, so created. And because if we are an essence of that, we would have the same, you know, ideas, right? And we do. Like, we grab inanimate objects, dolls, and we make them alive and have interactions. But imagine if those things were, you know, actually, like we're doing it now, creating AI, right? So we, on a macro scale, this has already happened, and we're just recreating these same processes. And it's this desire to have different experiences, to observe different experiences. And yeah, to me, what I call God is everything. It doesn't have an agenda, because as soon as you give it an agenda, you limit it. And I think God, from my perspective, is infinite and unlimited. And so, again, it's a paradox, because if you are everything, you are essentially nothing. But to me, that is kind of like the void, or, you know, it's so hard. Again, like, it's abstract and difficult to explain, but all I can do is use analogies and all these kind of things too. It's like, have you ever seen those artworks where they don't actually paint the picture? They're just like painting around it, and eventually you see this shape happen. You're like, what are they doing? They're just scribbling random stuff. But then eventually you notice that the stuff that they don't paint creates the picture. I feel like talking about these kind of matters, like esoteric matters, I can't actually say what it is, but I can give a lot of tangents and abstract metaphors to try to paint around it, so you at least kind of get a bit of a viewpoint of what I'm saying. Hopefully
Yeah.
that made a bit of sense.
Yeah, well, I definitely feel like, and I hope the listeners can also feel this as you're talking. It's you're kind of transmitting a sense of what you're communicating, and even like the words themselves are almost not so important as the actual kind of the energy or the feeling that you're transmitting, and that is what I'm understanding as you're talking. And actually, you touched on so many topics there that I would love to just go back onto some of those. Like, so I love this idea that you talked about how God's separated into not just two but three aspects, which I it occurs to me that with the idea of in Tantra, there's I think it's called the Sri Yantra, which is like a triangle, but then it sort of expands out into multiple, many triangular patterns, right? But the center of it is a three-sided triangle, I believe, where one side represents the observer, one side represents the observed, and the third side represents the action of observing. And those three components make up what we call existence or reality. And if you take away one of those components, then the entire reality just collapses into the point or the bindu that's in the
Yeah.
center of the Sri Yantra. And it made me wonder, like, it occurred to me as you were saying about this concept. And I find that fascinating because often in Tantra, we think of the divine as separating into two, like Shiva and Shakti. And well, even sort of going deep into Tantra teachings, we see that, in some of those scriptures, right? That, well, there is this kind of God consciousness that's neither male nor female. It's neither yin nor yang, but when it manifests into creation, it divides into these two aspects of Shiva and Shakti. But it's also important to bear in mind, as you are pointing out, that there's this kind of third aspect, which is part of the experiencing of reality. So yeah, it made me think of some of those things you were
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, well, essentially, like, to simplify it, how I kind of understand it is, in any kind of situation, in anything really, you have the seeker, you have that which is sought, and then you have the arena which that plays out within, and everything happens in that same process. Like, I don't think, like, if people want to drop comments on here and when after this podcast and try to think of a situation that doesn't have those three aspects, even just in a relationship, you have like, okay, that which is sought, you have the seeker, and then you have the arena which that happens within. And you see this in nature, the dancing and all that sort of stuff, but that can happen metaphorically in every aspect. If things are too easy, we lose interest or the game's over. And so we are always trying to strike a balance between having it difficult enough to keep us entertained, but also obviously be accessible. Otherwise, we give up if it's too hard. And the divine is essentially just creating this game over and over again. And I know this is going to, it's a paradox that saying that there's no reason or no meaning to the game other than just wanting to play the game and trying to create new ways to play the game is both infinitely liberating and infinitely depressing, depending on how you view it. Because I think we all grow up with a certain religious undertone or dogma and a certain reason or meaning to everything. And humans are meaning-making machines. We have to make meaning out of everything. But what do you mean by meaning? It's like you have to have a particular reason. It's like without playing just for the point of playing. It has to have some other reason attached to it. And so if the divine just wants to explore itself in different ways and to try different configurations and dances and all that sort of stuff, and when we've done that enough times, it evolves into something else. For a lot of people, that's terrifying to think that there's no linear path. We often think that rather than it be a cyclical, explorative, experimental dance for forever, potentially, to not head anywhere where we think, it needs to head. Whereas say Abrahamic religions, like, cool, there's two paths, up or down. Depending on what you choose, you go this way and that way. But really, like, logically, I know, and again, you can escape this by saying, okay, but you can't rationalize the divine. I call bullshit. I think that you can rationalize the divine, because if we are of the same divine, we should at least have glimpses of how it operates. And, to me, going to an eternal paradise of everything you love, if anyone's actually achieved that in real life, will know that gets boring very quickly without the challenges. And so with challenge comes pain and comes suffering. Yes, there is unnecessary suffering out there, but it's hard. Imagine if you were like fine-tuning and creating a universe like this. It would be tricky to know when to because without free will, we can't have all those bad things without having some sort of be able to make a choice. And without a choice, we're just on a narrow rail or path, and we would get sick of that. Yeah, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and it's like, it's sort of circling back to the question of like, why do you do what you do if you're never going to sort of get all the answers, kind of thing. I think for me personally, for example, as I go through my life, my spiritual practices, my spiritual path, from time to time, I get some kind of experience, or I get some kind of feeling or energy or revelation or understanding that kind of makes me feel amazing, right? It makes me feel like never before. And that makes me want to keep going on, like, what's next, sort of thing. And I wonder if you have a similar kind of experience, and how does that look like for you?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure if this is going to answer it, so feel free to re-ask it if I don't. But I think if you have a revelation that let's just say that there is no other agenda here other than what we all collectively believe is the reason for things, that can be really depressing to some people. And people could view it as nothing matters. It's like nothing matters. Like all this stuff, like, we're all going to pass, like none of this matters. But if that is true, paradoxically, the opposite is also true. And single thing that we do matters. In fact, we all matter equally. We're all co-creating this experience. And so you and I are both equally important in this game, and everyone has a say in it. I know on a practical aspect, some people's voices are louder in lots of different ways, but we're all co-creating this experience. And in fact, everything we do matters. Every single thing that we do matters, even if it seems on some small scale. But if the tantric view is correct theoretically, and we are all equally God, then all of our opinions are equal on some level, and it's trying to rectify that. So that is the trick then. If we're all the same being figuring this out and playing together, but we all have different opinions, it's like, how do we rectify that? And so, one, by maybe like listening and asking what we mean by certain things, because we all generally want the same things. We want to be happy, we want to feel valued. And yeah, but then it's also creating spaces within that for different experiences. And people get pleasure from different experiences. People get value from different experiences and have different ideas of what the world should be. So instead of, trying to make everything one and everyone follow one way of doing it, why can't we go with what seems like the universe's or God's original plan, and to have different experiences? It's like there seems to be this real want for everyone to be the same, for everyone to think the same. And not only does it seem like that has never been the case, and that will probably never be the case, but from this tantric view, the whole point of the universe, splitting from Shiva Shakti to Shiva and Shakti, and the experience around it within that, is to have all these different vantage points. And so not only is it impossible for two vantage points to see the same, that's kind of the point, because if we all see the same and think the same and speak the same, there is no game. The game is over and done. It's like, as soon as I go to open my mouth, you know exactly what I'm going to say. So there's no conversation. It's like everything stops moving. And some people admittedly think that would be great. And again, there's room for that to be the case. Some people, I speak to so many people who are like, oh, I'm just like so tired of life, and I'm done. This is my last round on Earth, and I mean, that's fine. Maybe some people need a rest, but I mean, I'm keen to keep coming back and contributing to make it a cooler playground, and also having understanding that I can't do everything. It's like there's so many issues with the world that not only don't I it's not my place and I don't have the capacity to solve, but will they ever be solved? Because even if we have world peace, that version of peace is not going to resonate with everyone. It's like, and it's like paradoxically kind of depressing, because it's like we go through these same cycles, and is it ever going to end? And I think just trying to find better games to play, or find ways to ideally benefit the whole, which again is tricky. It's like trying to do good by the whole or the majority of the world, while also doing well by yourself. And that's going to look different for everyone. Like, for example, I was heavy into veganism for about 7 years. I was pretty strict vegan, and to me that was really integral to how I wanted to show up in the world, to be kind to all beings. But then I started to get some really bad health issues, and I tried a lot of different ways and methods, and the only thing that ended up working for me was starting to reintroduce animal products. So then it's like trying to find, it's like, what's the right thing to do in that case then? If my value is doing, well, it's like, it's not very fair on me to try to do, you know what I mean? Like, and that's, I think, why I like non-dual Tantra, because it's not splitting things into right and wrong. Everything is relative, and understanding that everyone's going to have a different opinion on which one is right and wrong, depending on where they are and what their vantage point is. And, not feeling bad about prioritizing yourself. But it is a balance. It's like, don't prioritize yourself, or ideally don't prioritize yourself to the detriment of everyone else in a really bad way, but also not doing the opposite of that and like self-sacrificing too much. But then again, don't listen to me and like do whatever you want to do. I'm not like, it's not up to me. It's up to you. And so again, just so many paradoxes, and it can break your brain trying to understand it. It seems like we're just running around in circles and saying a lot of things, but then also not saying anything. It's like, you should do this, but also don't listen to me. It's tricky, bro.
Yeah. Well, what I love about you is that I know that you talk about all these ideas, but I know from following your content that you're actually kind of like living this stuff, or at least attempting in your best way to live this, to embody this. And I just want to bring this back around, because a lot of these ideas that you've mentioned already, you teach this in your training, and I love the concept of your training. If correct me if I'm wrong, it's called a ritual embodiment training. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
And I love the little kind of tagline that you have on your website: reforging the link between yoga, tantra, and magic.
Yeah.
That just immediately sparks in my brain fascination. It's like, wow, that sounds so cool. So I'm really curious to know, like, how do you teach these concepts specifically in that training? And perhaps by answering that question, you're also kind of maybe answering the question of like, how in general can we put this stuff into practice?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's the thing. We have gone on a lot of kind of esoteric philosophical tangents, and when you do intellectualize this stuff, it doesn't really make sense, and it just kind of, you get an error 404 code, and your brain breaks, and then you just go on with your life. But I think paradoxes can be understood and felt in the body by doing certain practices. And so my introduction to a lot of these practices was through what we call ceremonial magic. And so long story short, I was diving into lots of different religions and trying out certain practices, and nothing was really landing for me. And then I kind of stopped for a while until a mysterious event occurred, and a guy gave me a book on Hermetic magic, which Hermetic magic is kind of Greco-Roman mixed with Egyptian papyri. It's a good example because it's one of the first syntheses of magic, and it opened up a lot because it was written by a scholar, and it had a lot of historical evidence, historical chats in it. And eventually I tried some of it out. Weird things happened. It led me to expand my skeptical viewpoint on the world enough to search more. And because at that time I was pretty much atheist, like agnostic-ish. I was just super logical and rational, and to me, atheism just seemed logical, and I needed evidence. But again, like, to circle back to your first question, is something along the lines of like, how does that show up now in life? I think I have a looser view of what evidence is, because at the time I was I was ghost hunting at one stage, right? So I was like, okay, I want the universe to prove to me that like spirit beings exist, ghosts. But I was expecting to see it and to hear it and to be able to touch it and taste it and smell it. And if spirit beings exist, I'm probably not going to experience them through the five senses, because that they're not, they're incorporeal. And so, it seems logical to me now to have different kind of ideas or expectations around certain experiences. But to me, if it didn't operate through the five senses, it wasn't real. And so as I started to practice magic, which is essentially using symbolic ideas and gestures and rituals in order to get results from the universe. So most people start off with magic, like, I'm going to do a spell and I want something to happen. And I think that's a good place to start because weird things do happen. And to me, that kind of showed me that there is something outside myself that is going on. Something weird is happening that I don't fully understand. And I can't rationalize how that would have happened without some sort of mysterious intervention. And so I think the first step in working with magic is starting to understand that there might be aspects of reality that we don't fully understand or can rationalize. It's like what do they call like gravity initially? It's like action at a distance. There's, and there might be a scientific explanation that we, can figure out eventually why magic works. But at this stage, I think it is a bit of an art form because consciousness is such a variable as well. And so without going on too much of a tangent, essentially do certain rituals, do certain actions with certain symbols from a certain cultural tradition, and things should happen. And it starts to be a bit of a scientific process. It's like, cool, if I do these things, if I chant these sacred names, if I do these actions, if I do all that, will these things happen? And yes, they do, but there is also variables on that to different efficiency depending on like how invested you are into that ritual, emotional state, concentration. And so that's where yoga comes in, because if it was a science and if I say the sacred chant and I do the actions and I wave my wand or whatever, it should work the same every time, but it doesn't. And that's why I don't think it's a science, because science replicates results perfectly. It's like I mix this thing with this thing and I do this thing, the same result always happens. Whereas that's not the case in magic for me. There is a variable, and I think the variable is your state of mind, and that is often affected by, all the layers of self, by your hunger, by how erratic your thoughts are, how well you can concentrate. And so if I was really to try to simplify what magic is in two different ways, the first is to unravel all the layers of self, to notice where your beliefs are, what your common thoughts are, patterns, unravel all of that, lay it all out, see what's going on, see which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to get rid of, and then rebuild yourself. And then do that a million more times over your lifetime. Yeah. But essentially, it's also creating a communication between it. So a magical ritual to me is stepping outside of your current way of operating into something else temporarily to make a change, and then stepping back into reality after tweaking. It's like stepping, behind the scenes and tweaking like the code or something like that. It's like, there's in magic, there's divination, manifestation, and initiation. Divination is learning to read the code to the matrix, I guess, learning how to ask questions and get answers and how to listen. Whereas manifestation is learning how to speak the code, how to write the code. And then initiation is once you get bored with listening and speaking, what's the bigger picture and how can this actually lead to a longer term transformation of things. And so what I found is that the path of magic tends to lead into something along the lines of yoga anyway, because you realize that you not only need to do the techniques, but you need to train your magical muscles. But most of what is now modern magic, ceremonial magic, and occultism is heavily inspired from yoga and Tantra very specifically. So a lot of modern yoga practices are very interlinked with occultism. It's like, so you kind of got yoga, which came to the West and split off into occultism, and then yoga kind of went to like mainstream exercise. It's obviously more complicated than that, but that's kind of like the main two things. Like yoga came to the West, became magic and occultism, and became exercise, like in a certain way. And so, for example, with the seven-chakra rainbow system, chakras are, have always been a part of Tantra, and they only show up out of Tantra, same as Kundalini. There's no evidence of Kundalini or chakras outside of the Tantras, which are the scriptures that we know as of Tantra. And Tantra kind of evolved. You probably covered this in your other podcast, but around like 500 to 700 CE, out of a rebellion to classical yoga, because classical yoga was about renouncing the physical world, trying to escape it. We don't want to be here. This place sucks. But also, it was very hierarchical in that a lot of, a lot of women couldn't practice initially, and also different castes had to practice separately. Whereas Tantra was like, no, we're all equal. Peasants got to sit next to the kings. And also men could practice, but also it was about being in the physical world and all that sort of stuff. So then fast forward to, I think, when was it? Like 19th century, where the Western world was trying to re-find itself spiritually after primarily having just, Catholicism, Christianity, and having that for a while, but then also wanting to tap into these other parts of ourselves, whether that is like our intimacy and sensuality and things like that, or even just other aspects of magic. And when I think, I forget who it was, but some of the Theosophical Society, was it Blavatsky that went over? I can't remember. I think there's a few main people, but someone published an article about chakras in, I think, one of the Theosophical Society's publications. And then this spread like wildfire, and we saw a few different occult authors start to bridge this idea of chakras, mix it with things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, mix it with like color theory, and a few other pieces. And then just from like 3 or 4 books over the next 100 years up until the modern day now, we have this 7-chakra rainbow system. And it was just it was a badly translated scripture. I can't remember what actual scripture it was, but it was a badly translated one from, I think, the Hatha yoga period of like 1600, 1700 or something, that eventually made its way and got republished. And yeah, so that was originally based on a 6-chakra system that got one added to it and then expanded into Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So a lot of random information, but I'll try to summarize. So essentially, the West, in the early 1900s, the West was getting super excited about foreign exotic traditions like yoga. They took a badly translated bit of information about chakras, and then, just as we do, we just fill in all the gaps, make our own thing up, and then that just spread. And I think it spread because for the first time in a long time, we could have a spiritual experience within our body. And a lot of the Western spiritual and magical traditions were very much about seeing things outside of us. So if you look at the grimoires of the magical traditions, it was all about like, calling in God from outside of you into you, and then calling on the angels and calling on the spirit beings, and very, very a viewpoint of we are just a lowly human and we have to look outside of ourselves to be spiritual. And that is very much dualistic thinking. Whereas the chakra system was like, no, we can actually have these spiritual powers and experiences within us, and we can tap into deep layers within ourselves to find ourselves, and have these spiritual experiences. So this was a great starting point to actually be like, oh, actually, maybe our bodies can be divine and can be spiritual. The issue here is that all the original chakra systems, because there's hundreds of different chakra systems, everything from like over 100 chakras in a system to chakras based on Indian musical notes. But mainly what they were used for was to install concepts, abstract concepts, and deities into. There has never been, in our current knowledge, a rainbow colored chakra system. And there has never been one that basically intellectualizes all these concepts that we do in the current one. So in the current chakra system, it is really good at breaking down what we need as humans to live a fulfilled life. Like, we got the root chakra, we need safety, and then we need relationships, and then we need our understanding of like our place in society and power, and then we need like deeper connections, and then we need creativity. But the issue here is it's not connected to the original purpose, which was to have spiritual liberation or to have an abstract thinking to connect us to the divine, to kind of have a broader picture, because all of these things are, like, in my perspective, operating through the layer of chitta, the intellectual mind, and they remind us of what we're lacking, right? So in order to to delve into the root chakra in the seven chakra rainbow system is to do I have what I need, and evaluating. And it's like keeping us in the intellectual mind. It's very much understanding what we're lacking, or maybe what we obtain at the moment. And like Tantra to me is all about like freedom and liberation and moksha, right? So the more that we hold on to all those things that we need to have a fulfilling life, the more it's keeping us from having a full liberation experience. And so I work with a chakra system that is a five-chakra system. And the reason why I do that is that what I found after researching a lot of different chakra systems, a lot of different traditions, is the one thing that seems to be overarching through nearly all the different traditions is this idea of the five sacred elements. And so this is earth, water, fire, wind or air, and void or space. And that essentially represents the process of manifestation. And so everything can be seen as this process. So, when you were starting this podcast, right, you had an idea which was kind of plucked out of the void. So the void is like the infinite potential. It's where everything like returns to, and everything is born from. It's a cosmic womb, so to speak. And so your idea came out, and then you started to have the intention to create a podcast. So you started to enact it through wind. So wind is action. So we started to take flight. But then eventually you probably met resistance. Okay, well, I don't have a good microphone. I actually don't have a good space to record. Actually, how am I going to find guests? So this is fire. This is resistance. But fire is where most of us stop. And we're like, oh, there's resistance here. It's not meant to be. It's not flowing. We should just give up here. But no, this is where like we bridge into the physical, because in order to make it manifest, we need that resistance to actually bring it into the manifest reality, into the physical. And so through that process, you might have changed a few things. Actually, it's better if I do it this way. Actually, I might rebrand it this way. And through that fire, it transmutes and changes it into something more tangible and practical that can be fully manifest. And then we start to play and mold it through water. So then it actually starts to become more solid, and we can feel it. It feels more real. And then we're starting to mold it, change it. And eventually, once we're happy with it, we start to make it more permanent through earth, right? And so earth is more permanent. But on the reverse of that, if I have a habit that I'm addicted to something or other, and it's just my identity. That's like, this is who I am. I do these things. I just love, I love podcasting. I can't stop. I'm addicted to it. It's who I am. That identity seems so solid in earth, but really if we start to loosen that identity and we can start to soften it, it becomes, water. And then we can start to remold it. Actually, I can, maybe I can be less addicted to this idea, or maybe I can actually take that addiction and put it somewhere else, or maybe that. And then we start to burn it up through fire. And then eventually it's so light, I don't even know how I was addicted to this thing. And then boom, it goes back into the void, which creates more spaciousness for a new thing to drop in. And so this process of destroying something to make space for something new, this is the cosmic process, right? And so this is just like fun, cool, like elements and wind and fire and earth, and everything changed when the Fire Nation came, and like all these fun little things. but it's to help us to understand and to work with and interact with a cosmic truth, so to speak. Yeah.
So how do you, so when you're working with the five chakra system, you're using these elements, or the concepts of these elements, in conjunction with those chakras. What are you doing exactly? Is it like meditation, or is this part of some of the rituals that you're doing?
Yeah. So Tantra, a key part of Tantra yoga is using different things to keep our body and awareness focused, to completely immerse ourselves with nothing but the concept that we're trying to do. And so I could be like, okay, I want you to connect with the earth element. You'd be like, oh, what the hell does that mean? Like, okay, just feel solid and grounded and all this sort of thing. So what we're trying to do, we then start to use focal points in the body to anchor an idea in. And so chakras were generally up and down this, what they call the central channel. So I think we're going to need at least one more podcast to really dive into all this stuff.
Yeah.
But essentially,
Definitely.
to simplify it, that we have our awareness, the three bindus. So our awareness, and then we have our energy body, what is kind of happening, what our beliefs are about our identity, and then we have the physical aspect of that. And within the energetics of our body, this is why it's funny that people talk about the chakras or the chakras as like anatomical, like definitive things in our body.
Yeah.
Whereas
Sorry. So I like it the way you, when you're referring to sort of like the seven rainbow system, you change your pronunciation and you say chakras. and then when you're talking about the older five chakra system, then you pronounce chakras properly.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I got that idea from, so Christopher Wallace he's the author of Tantra Illuminated. He has been probably my main influence and teacher in the Tantric tradition. And he kind of makes a suggestion in that, because the way the English language changes, if enough people use a word a certain way, that becomes a definition. It doesn't matter who used it first, it's like the predominant agreement. And what has happened is that the modern world, when they say chakras, which the original Sanskrit pronunciation is like chocolate, chakras, they say chakras. And that actually works out well, because then it's like we've got a different word for a different thing, because the modern seven-chakra rainbow system is a brand new invention, only about 100 years old, which is great for the Western mind, but it's usually pronounced chakras, like a sh sound. And so that's a great way to differentiate the two, because they're essentially a different thing. They're a modern occult practice. They're a magical practice. And so modern rainbow chakras or original five chakras, so you can use those definitions and ideas.
Sorry, I interrupted you there. You were talking about how to like embody those elements, and you were talking about the central channel.
Yeah, cool. Feel free to interrupt me, bro, as many times as you want, because otherwise I'm just going to keep on going on tangents.
It's just that there's so many fascinating points. I don't want to let them go. I want to like come back to that. As you say, I think we need another podcast. But
yeah.
But anyway, you were saying about how like you can embody those elements along the central channel.
Yeah. So essentially, the central channel is seen as like the main point, the main like area where things happen in the body. And so the chakras are things you kind of focus on and install into the body and like essentially make up. But where they're located in the body is usually based on energetic, like very focused energetic areas of the body. And so what I mean by that is there's three main centers that they're called bindus, and they're essentially like the main three awareness points or experience points. And they are identical to the three seats of qi in Chinese medicine, so the three dantian. And they are around about the head, the heart space. So the heart space is just below the sternum in that soft spot, and then the lower belly. And so what examples we can give is when you're really focused on concentrating on something, you might start to like furrow your brows and frown a little bit. And so next time you're really focused on something or looking at something on your phone or reading or very intently, you get this like energetic, reaction around that point of your body. For example, the energetic center is based in the heart space, and we've all probably had that experience of love or even heartbreak, and you can have that visceral experience in that area of the body, but nothing physical is actually happening. Nothing wrong with your heart, nothing's bad is happening, but we still feel it, and that's an energetic effect. And we've all had that gut feeling, or that feeling of being punched in the gut, or something really wrong in the gut, or feeling really right in the gut. And that's also like an energetic focal point. So they're like, okay, cool, well, these areas are kind of receive certain experiences, so we'll use them as like catalysts to install ideas. And so those original 3 bindus or 3 focal points of the body then expand to maybe 5 chakras or 7 chakras, 6, 8, 100, depending on how complicated you want to make it and what you're trying to achieve through that. But essentially, it's installing concepts in your body so you can interact with them. And so the next step then is to keep like your hands busy as well, so you can have mudras. So for example, with the 5 element system, we first install the concept. Let's just say the earth element. It's installed in the perineum, within the root chakra, but it's actually a golden color. It's shining gold. Its shape is a square or a cube. And then we have a mantra. So we have a sound. So the sound of the earth element is a lum sound or a lum. And then we can also take an earth element mudra by placing the ring finger to the thumb. And then we can also have a visualization. So we're immersing all of our senses in one thing, and it's an abstract concept that we're trying to understand how it fits into the bigger picture. And so that's the thing. It's like I'm keeping my hands busy with the mudra. I'm keeping the rest of my body busy with like a stance or like an asana posture. I'm keeping my my voice and my hearing and all my attention busy on making a sound. And then I'm keeping my attention on focusing on a particular visualization. So it's like complete sensory immersion. And then everything is trying to focus on one particular thing, and that's understanding what the hell this earth element is. But not just what it is in isolation, it's how it's connected to the bigger picture. And that's why, rather than just have one individual concept, we have a chakra system, because we're trying to understand how this system of ideas works together for some particular function, and all happening within the body. And why in the body? Because partly on a practical sense, because I can just focus on a particular part of my body and put all my attention there and install that and access that at any time. But also because Tantra sees the body as the divine. There is no difference between like the cosmic earth element and my body just receiving that earth element. But again, to probably is going to confuse people, is these are just ideas that we can chop and change. Like there's a lot of evidence of shifting the elements to different chakra points. And so in the one that I work with, which is known as the Tattva Shuddhi, or the Bodha Shuddhi, and it is the 5 chakra system of having the earth element as the perineum or the root, and then the water element as the lower belly or the dantian, the fire as in the heart, and the wind is actually in the soft palate in the mouth, and then the crown is the void element. And there's actually a sheet that Christopher Wallace made. It's like a spreadsheet of like where we find all these different chakra points in different systems. And one thing that I don't think is in any of them, I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure in none of the chakra systems there is a solar plexus chakra. And it's interesting that idea of the solar plexus or the sun as a very important idea came from like the Western traditions, like the Greco-Roman ideas of this solar importance. And, especially that we associate the solar plexus with like this importance of it and our place in society and all these different things. So it's just it's just understanding that a lot of things, it circles back to a lot of what we've been talking about today, in that there's no one truth or one answer for everything, and there's no one chakra system. It's like, what are you trying to achieve here? It's like, figure out why you're actually doing what you're doing, and then figure out what is actually going to support you in that. And if you are like, at a level in your life that you're trying to take stock of all the pieces of your life and trying to get your life together, if your life's a bit of a mess, then the seven chakra rainbow system is great for that, because you can be like, okay, well, I'm not feeling great, maybe because I don't have, I've got a roof over my head. Actually, I don't have a very good relationship. And actually, I don't feel valued at work. Maybe that's why. And then also, I haven't been tapping into my creativity. So that's a real good to take stock of what you need in life, but that's not going to lead you to spiritual, liberation. And that's only going to do you so well for so long, because that's just going to keep reminding you of what you don't have in life, and it's going to lead to more suffering eventually. So it's like, trying to understand what you need at each time of your life. So so the rainbow system is not bad, but it's not designed for what they originally designed chakras for, and that is essentially spiritual liberation.
And it's as you said, it depends, like, what you want to achieve, isn't it? It's like all these systems can be used to achieve something different, right? And they're as you said, it's not that one is bad or one is better than the other. It's just that they do different things. They serve different functions, and as individuals, we kind of have that free will to choose what kind of tool we want to work with. And I love your description of how you are actually like working with those elements in the chakras, and you're using all of the senses of the body through my as I'm learning about Tantra. One of the things I've really noticed is that tantric practices tend to use all the senses. Like, so a typical tantric meditation will use as many of the senses as you can, and it really helps with like the concentration and the focus, rather than just trying to sit and kind of meditate on nothing. Or it's a lot easier in a way when you're actually using the whole body. And so this is what we mean, I suppose, when we talk about embodiment, in sort of embodied spirituality or embodied practices. So I love that description.
And it does create this chain of effects, so that if we're linking this mudra, this hand gesture, to this sound, to this visualization, to this sensation in my body, to this concept, then I only end up having to do one. Like if I touch, I have to be careful now, because if I touch this like finger to this, I immediately feel this like tingling sensation in my perineum and this groundedness and all this sort of stuff. It's like you're creating this software, this system that I just press a button or I make a sound, and this just feedback loop of all these experiences just happen. But the thing is as well, this is happening on an unconscious level anyway, where we do certain things that link with certain things. And so it's just understanding what is a natural process of human habit and behavior, but taking like control of that and installing these ideas. And like you can do the same thing with the runes as well. And so you can take a mudra. So for example, there's a mudra of the runes for answers, which is linked to, speaking and communication. And for me, if I make a mantra, so that like I use the runic mantra of answers with the mudra, I'll do that before I'm about to do a big presentation or something like that. So I remember, being about to present at one of the first festivals I presented. I was nervous, and behind the scenes, I couldn't do there's like full yoga postures you can do for each rune as well, but I'd linked all of those big movements, those big ideas, those sounds into a little sneaky mudra that I can do to help calm myself down. And I mean, it's not a perfect science. Like, it's not that I was immediately calm, and sometimes it works better than other times. But we are starting to tap into these ideas and install them in the body. Like any idea that we can fathom, we can install, that we can have an experience of. We can recreate that experience through these tantric ideas. And that's the idea. It's like, cool, what kind of experiences do you want to have? Yeah, and it's like limitless. It's once you realize you are essentially, I know it'll sound weird, but we are like a computer or a software program. Like the Matrix has so many cool like ideas and things that could be used as analogies, but we are installing operating systems, and when we aren't aware of what we're doing, we will default to that. If your default operating system is to drive a certain way home from work, you can focus and you can go a new way, but as soon as your mind wanders, your body just like goes back to autopilot. It's like defaulting to autopilot mode, going, and then you're like, whoa, what just happened? I'm home. And we have these ways as well. And it's just finding a balance, because again, like to circle back to the start, biggest value is the pursuit of mystery, but doing that in a way that also nourishes my life. Like I could easily be some crazy homeless person wandering around the streets just being like, you are God, I am God, we are all God, like all this kind of thing. But to me, that's not like it's not really how I want to live. But it's trying to find a balance of actually having success in all endeavors of the life. And I think there was an occult school that I was into early on, and after all the things and all the stuff that you read about their philosophy, their main like thing was "so what." That was like their tagline, and I loved it because it's like, okay, cool. I work with the five elemental chakras, and I've like unraveled the 6 layers of self, and I have gone through tantric initiation, and I've delved and into the biggest plant medicine journeys. It's like, so what? And it's actually like, and it's not an aggressive thing. It's like it's a real practical question. It's like, so what? How has that made a difference in your life? I don't care like if you have had a plant medicine journey and thought you were a reincarnated prince or something like that. Like, how do you treat your partner? If you treat them like crap, you're still not a person that I want to hang out with. I don't care if you're a prince. It's like, how does that show up? And like, so what? And it is an important question to ask yourself. And when I can't help it, like I get into some of this stuff, and I'm human. Sometimes I have these like amazing visceral spiritual experiences, and I'm like, oh my God, I feel so connected, and this and that, and like, wow, I really have like such a cool system here, and I have this. It's like, so what? It's like it's a good little mantra to pull me back into this humbleness. And I really appreciate what you said earlier, because like, I guess being humble, or just checking myself before I wreck myself kind of thing, is like just seeing how is this making my life better, and how is it making the people in my lives better, and how am I contributing to society, and is what I'm doing making the world a better place, at least from my real genuine perspective, so that I can hopefully leave the world better than when I arrived here, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. I love that little "so what" mantra. I think that's really fantastic. It's at the same time, it kind of makes you more humble. It creates that beginner mind to help you explore and grow. And then as you said, it like makes you reflect. Like, okay, so if you've had amazing, powerful experiences, you still need to make like a human effort to actually treat people nice, or to kind of bring some good into the world, or to manifest positive helpful things in the world. It's not just going to happen like without some effort involved. You can't just sit and have an experience and hope that your world will just change magically.
Yeah, and having like a practical example of what you're claiming. Like I know I joke about the reincarnated thing, but it is something I see a lot in especially like the neo-tantric circles. Like I feel like everyone's a reincarnated Egyptian priest or priestess these days. And it's funny because it's like, what does that actually mean? And that so what thing. But it's funny because imagine someone was like, oh yeah, I'm a reincarnated mason, like, and not the Freemason, but like a builder, right? So I'm a reincarnated builder. Be like, okay, cool. Well, like, prove it. Build me something, and you'd see straight away that they can't build. So it's like, what does that actually mean? I was like, okay, maybe you'll pick up building quicker than someone who wasn't a reincarnated builder. You still got to go do your apprenticeship and you still got to do the thing. It's like, I don't care if you're a reincarnated surgeon, I'm not going to let you do surgery on me just because you got to go through medical school. It's like, but we don't have this kind of like thing that checks the validity for people, because it's like, what does that even mean if you're a reincarnated priestess or a priest or something like that? It's like, it's like actually breaking that down. Okay, cool. So what does that mean here? It's like, oh, I have codes. What do you mean codes? Like, oh, I have like these symbols and information. It's like, well, I have symbols and information. Like, I could just draw random pictures. It doesn't mean anything. Oh yeah, it's not for us to understand. It's like, okay, but like, it's just like asking questions and breaking this all down. And I think it's tricky because it comes from a genuine desire to want to be a part of a culture and want to connect. And there is a childlike part of us that I think is important to play make believe and to play these roles and all that sort of stuff. But then, like, the danger is a lot of these people that are just making these claims are really loud about it, and so people go and pay a lot of money to learn from these people, and they just get told the exact same thing. It's like, oh honey, like, you are also a reincarnated priestess, so you just tell everyone that and they'll give you money, and then you tell them to tell the next person. It's like coaches that coach coaches to coach coaches about coaching coaches. And it's like, where is the real value of making your and other people's lives better, other than just playing this make believe game? And it is also tricky because essentially what I'm doing with magic and is playing this make believe game where I sit down and I visualize that I have all these. So it's a fine line. Like, it's easy for me to say this, but can I then explain to someone who says the same thing about me about why what I'm doing has value? And it's like, yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah. And it's one of the things I love about your teachings is that you carry that exact attitude into your teachings. I've heard you talking about your ritual embodiment yoga training, and I believe I heard you saying something like at the beginning, you're sort of teaching your students, like, you know, I'm teaching what I feel is, works for me, but maybe it doesn't work for you, or maybe it's something different for you. So I like that approach you've got. It's like you don't have that approach of like, what I say is the truth, and if everything else is not going to work. So that to me is a kind of a sign, an indication of an embodied, sort of authentic spiritual practice, that you actually do what you say. You walk your talk, so to speak. And I'm just looking at the time. We're gonna have to sort of wrap this up
Yeah,
here.
no worries.
But I could easily talk about all of these topics. And I just wanted to quickly mention to the listeners, in case they didn't know, you mentioned about runes. So Daniel does a lot of rune work as well, and you have your YouTube channel, Daniel Erulian YouTube channel, where you do rune readings, don't you? So any of the listeners who are interested in that, go to his YouTube channel and find out about runes. And I love what you said about how you kind of use some of those mudras with the runes as well. So loads of really interesting topics, but we'll have to explore those more deeply in another day, another episode. Maybe I could just ask you to tell the listeners, like, briefly about your um, embodiment yoga training? Like, how long is it, and how could they sort of join or access that if they wanted to?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I appreciate what you said, and I think it's just a mix of uh understanding that the way I practice has changed over time, depending on my needs and my goals. That one size fits all doesn't apply to all my students. Like what works for me has maybe not worked as well for certain students, or understanding that students need different needs and understanding that. But a big part, and this relates to the training, is that I am a massive history nerd. And I think like understanding where we've come from, it's like both ways. So we're here. I'm going to do. I use a lot of hand visuals and stuff. So obviously they won't be able to see me. But if you think of a tree, it's all the roots splay out in different directions, and then all those roots coalesce and meet in the trunk, and then they branch out in all these equally different directions. So if you want to know where we can go, a big indicator of that is to see where we've been in the past. And the common ground is that we have all these different traditions because we've branched off in so many different ways, and no one way seems to work for everyone. And so in ritual embodiment, we actually delve into where these traditions have come from. We see how they're kind of intersecting and bridging, and then we see the possibilities and invite the possibilities of where it can go from here. And so I obviously teach everyone a like traditional work was traditional as possible as I can, with working with this five chakra system, the layers of self, and going over where these practices came from, but also understanding this is just a template. And as the humans who created these have done, we can experiment and see where this can potentially go and evolve to over time. And each one of us, as a different vantage point and a different representation of the divine, will have our own flavor to express that, and to not teach dogmatically. I'm not looking for robots to just, regurgitate what I say. In a lot of them, and probably the students really don't like this me. I will tell them all this information, and then also tell them that this might not actually be the case or true, and get them to question stuff, and you know melt their brains a little bit early on. But I think they're definitely a benefit of it in the long run. So
Yeah.
so yeah, how can they get? You can just go to the website ritualembodiment.com. All the information is on there, and it is a full 200-hour Yoga Alliance accredited teacher training. So you'll be qualified to teach classical tantric yoga, hatha yoga, vinyasa flow yoga. I also have a tai chi and kung fu background, so I weave a lot of flowiness into it. You'll be a way more qualified breath worker than all these breath workers that claim to do breath work. Honestly, our pranayama and breath work session is way more in depth than most breathwork courses, and you'll also be qualified to teach meditation and mantra and all the things. So it's pretty big. So it's definitely a big commitment, and it's gonna test you in a lot of ways. So I recommend people, if they want to just dip their toes in, to start with Mage, which is essentially focusing on the five element chakra system, and applying that to ritual and magic and all that sort of stuff as well. So that's a hybrid kind of system. But also just committing and diving in is also a good way to do things as well. So they can do that if they wanna dive in the deep end with the ritual embodiment.
So Mage is your 12-week course, which is I like it says here, journey into classical tantra and original chakras. So that's a great idea. And the yoga training is obviously where you are in Australia, right? Do you have any sort of online kind of courses that people can access if they don't live in Australia?
Yeah, so it's actually all online. It's only recently that I've started doing in-person stuff again. So I've built ritual embodiment to be a purely online experience. So like you've got this vast platform. There's ways to track your progress. I built out these apps in Discord which give you points for logging your daily practices, and it's very interactive. It's a great little community, and even your teaching we do as live videos, so you can practice teaching. So it can be done 100% online, but there is options now that I'm collaborating with yoga studios around Australia, and I'm running a retreat probably next year in Thailand. So you can do your in-person hours. So like the other option is to do some hours in person, and then the rest you can complete online as well. So there's like
Oh,
mixes of
cool.
different things, but it is designed to be 100% done online for anyone
Oh,
who
that's
wants to do
cool.
it. So
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Well, so gosh, so many fascinating things that you're doing, Daniel. Well, I guess we'll have to wrap it up there because
yeah, no,
I was
I
I
feel
was
you, bro. Yeah.
I was
No, I
like
feel
trying
like
to
you and I
keep
could
it.
talk for a while, and yeah, there's so many more things. But yeah, I reckon we could do another part 2, 3, 4.
Yes. Oh, I would love to. I would absolutely love to. Like some of those topics are big passions of mine. The 5+1 layer model. I love talking about that. The chakras, the runes. Oh, there's so much stuff here to explore and create episodes about. So great. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. And so anyone who wants to get in touch with Daniel, best thing was what? Go to the website, is it?
Yeah, if you just go to ritualembodiment.com, that's probably the main website. Otherwise, Instagram is a good place to find me, Daniel Erulian, so Erulian. But yeah, ritualembodiment.com, or I'm sure you put links in the show notes.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. All links will be down below in the show notes. On I think this podcast will be on a few platforms, so links are all in the show notes. Links also to your podcast on Spotify, and Make Yoga Magic Again is the name of the podcast, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I've been following along with the episodes there. Your YouTube channel really fascinating. So yeah, so anyone who wants to get connect with Daniel, I'll have all the links down below. Yeah, thank you so much, brother. This has been really cool, really fun. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining
thank you,
me.
bro. Yeah, I feel like we could talk for much longer. So, but no, I really
Definitely.
appreciate you reaching out, man. It's been a pleasure.